I would put music and some audio cues in this intro, but I don't have any. Sorry. Humanity is complex. Just when we have a full grasp on comprehending it all, just when we can nail down the fundamentals of being human, just when we can start drawing a line in the sand between good and evil, detriments to those efforts of understanding arrive, the irrationality that can shake up the understanding of ourselves, that just makes it all the more complicated to know what to think or believe in life. The constant underlying theme of humanity has always been that our actions aren't simply events that affect ourselves, but can shape the world around us in ways we may never think of before it happens. How we perceive knowledge, beliefs, morality, and our existence can all be defined by the world around us, and more often than not, the world each of us personally see is small compared to how big and diverse it really is. Indeed, we may never truly know everything there is to humanity in a single lifetime. From all 13 episodes, Kino's journey is very much that story, or stories rather, not simply about a traveler exploring a beautiful but uncertain world, but one that delves into the essentials of what we perceive to be humanity. An anime that seeks answers about who we are as conscious beings, the complications life gives, and the tragedies or cruelties that come along with the package. I wasn't expecting much out of this anime going in. I was recommended it from time to time. I'd hear about it in passing. Leafblady, the same guy who was generous enough in sending me those Fate Zero figures a while back, loves the show, so I finally gave in. I saw the first episode, then I saw the second, the third, and the fourth, until finally reaching the final episode and being shocked at just how much I managed to gain from it as a result. Starting as a little girl in a town isolated and tightly controlled in a totalitarian sort of way, our protagonist, Kino, and her talking motorcycle, Hermes, set out into the beautiful world, and that really is the core gist of what Kino's journey is based upon. There is more to that summary, of course, but the show is mostly in an episodic structure with little in the way of substantial amounts of backstory aside from an episode dedicated to it. By and large, the journey Kino undertakes is the only true overarching plot you'll get, but it isn't so much the aspect of going place to place that's the hook that ties it all together, but rather the places she comes to visit themselves, if not inadvertently getting tangled up in some sort of conflict it may have. From there, this is where the meat of the show lies. The questions Kino's journey can throw at you is surprisingly vast. In one scenario, there's a town ran entirely by machines. Another is a railroad that's being built, destroyed, and rebuilt continuously. Another involves a woman with a dream to fly into the sky, while another is mysterious, a seemingly perfect family where one is not like the others. Can a majority sufficiently sustain themselves without a ruler and without fail? Can we really make peace without bloodshed? Can we understand each other and make the world we perceive around us a better place? The hook, the thing that latched me onto Kino's journey, isn't that it's optimistic, but rather that it's skeptical. If mankind had the ability to read the minds of one another, could we achieve a peaceful societal understanding, or will each of us be so different from one another in conflicting ways that we will never be able to tolerate those we know and split apart as a result? Is having no reason to have ambition in life an ideal position, or is it within us, as a seemingly pointless existence, to find some goal for ourselves, even if it's entirely selfish, hollow, and is only to serve our own existential fulfillment? Is the world as we know it free, or is there really some sort of force or power pulling every string in ideas and thought in society that it's all so blurred we don't even know it? Never has an anime I've seen throw so many questions at me about the philosophical, ethical, and moral dilemmas associated with being who we are the way Kino's journey has. Sentimentality, free will, rationality, we all try to champion these things, but when all is said and done, flaws arise eventually. We crave revenge out of anger. Free will is nothing when we have nothing to strive for, and a world without definite rule, governed by the many who are unsure of what is best for themselves, may well bring collapse to their own way of life. We all express sadness at our dead. We all seek something to believe in. We all wonder when the world is going to end. I know I'm going on and on about this stuff, but without going into full-on spoilers, characters, that really does indicate what Kino's journey tries to go for. Questions and individual answers to each of them. The places Kino and Hermes go to each tackle a different subject, sometimes with predictable ends, sometimes with absolutely shocking ends that leave you questioning things. But for how bad it is that we express sorrow, anger, and sheer blind arrogance in the world, there will always be someone with ambition that could very well change the world for the better, even under so much doubt. We can be as creative as we can be destructive, but no matter where the wind blows, the inability to express real emotion and control who we are as a person can be a hell in of itself, a prison of the soul. It's all supported brilliantly by the tone, which doesn't necessarily go for an overall grim or overall bright and cheerful, so much as it goes for a sense of abstraction, eeriness, maybe occasional bursts of the macabre. It says much how you can have a world filled with all this color, with steampunk, science fiction, and fantasy elements that give the world a fairy tale quality, yet features so much ambiguity without becoming full-on dark fantasy, digi sci-fi, or dystopian steampunk. The scenery and art direction for architecture are of old European influences with a healthy splash of Victorian, medieval, and occasional uses of more modern-day imagery. It's a large mix, but it's one that never overpowers the underlying fantastical feeling of it all. Even the fact that Hermes is literally a talking motorcycle helps to support this pillar of Kino's journey's fantasy, even when that fantasy is used to show how tragic, melancholic, or borderline evil the human experience is shown. A lot of that is due to the presentation, I think. Much like how the messy presentation in Higurashi helps to convey a sense of unfamiliarity, much of Kino's journey's impact isn't in what is objective, but implied. Regardless of the art's inconsistent nature, there are plenty of good-looking scenes in the show, not necessarily because of the strength of the art quality, but the strength of intention. Kino's presentation requires a kind of subjectivity to be appreciated for all it's worth. The majestic atmosphere of a country landscape that goes by, the melancholy of a minimalistic space, the implied beauty of a field of roses where the quality of the art fails to do it justice, but the feelings the image provokes is on point. It all makes everything feel like an ever-shifting dream. Dreamlike is one of the ways to describe Kino's journey's tone. Its messy artistic design weaves it together. Even the colors are somewhat desaturated, not in a way to make the show look grim, but to give it the look of an old painting with a noticeable warm color tinting, providing an overexposed glow and haze in instances that helps sell the dreamlike quality of the experience. A dreamlike experience that soars to the high heavens where human ingenuity and empathy connects us together, or descends into a nightmare where our vulnerabilities show and the worst of us is let out in all its infamy. As shocking as the series can be, though, it never picks one side. Indeed, Kino's journey is best when it's at its most ambiguous. This ambiguity is simply but effectively portrayed by Kino herself. As the protagonist, Kino is a true neutral. With her mostly deadpan personality, Kino is quite possibly the best fitting protagonist for a story like this. Kino isn't what one might call a truly good person, but she isn't heartless, and it's this tightrope that actually makes her an intriguing character. Her role in this story is to be the outsider, and sometimes being an outsider is to be the element that intervenes. When she's in danger, she fights thanks to the training of her master, having an assortment of weapons including knives and her trusty pistols that she uses when things are on the ropes, but she's definitely no hero. She's a traveler after all. Her goal is to go from place to place and see as much of the world as she can. In the different places she and Hermes visit, the people are so caught up in their own world to view anything beyond it, which is more or less the opposite of Kino. In a way, her goal of seeing more and more of the world she tries to view as beautiful involves some sort of naivete on her part, a traveler who explores no matter how dark or hopeful it all can be. That naivete, inherent in Kino, the yearning to explore the world, is important to the overall themes of her character. Generic anime protagonists actively proclaim that they'll never give up in the most overblown of ways, but in the case of Kino, her will is done purely by actions. We even get to understand why she only limits herself to staying in one place for 3 days. She wants to avoid pain. But even when she stays, even at her lowest points, when what she sees is the most heartbreaking being. The seemingly endless naivete gives her the will to never give up on her journey, and it's that will to continue that strikes a level of admirability towards who she is as a protagonist. This is a case where if she were a more expressive character overall, I don't think it would have worked quite as well. Besides, even if Kino is on the more reserved side, there is always Hermes to provide levity, and the chemistry between the two can be a joy to see and hear. Are there any problems to Kino's journey? Well, the series is at its best when it explores the different facets of the human experience, but it doesn't always make it the focus. The show is at its worst, which is to say it's still good but isn't delving into its core hook, when it has a more usual story to tell. The two-part Colosseum story arc is probably the closest Kino's journey comes to having a standard plotline and standard direction in what is otherwise a fascinating narrative direction because of how unusual it is. In this arc, we're presented with the closest thing to a standard villain, an insane king drunk on power, in what is, at its core, a tournament storyline with some commentary on societal class and ambiguity here and there. Again, it's the closest the show gets to featuring a typical story direction in a narrative that's otherwise unorthodox. It's the weakest part of the show, if you ask me. There's also the episode about a female engineer who dreams to fly by building an airplane, despite the pressure and expectations of her village that favors agriculture. It's good and supplies the optimistic aspect of Kino's journey by highlighting mankind's ambition for achievement and discovery, but like the Colosseum arc, it's also a standard story when compared to the rest of the show. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Lord knows a break from the more surreal and existential aspects of the anime are welcome from time to time. I just find it fascinating that the parts I like least about Kino's journey are the parts where things are at their most clear-cut and easy to swallow. I think there's something to be learned from this about the contrast between being different for the sake of it and being different because you want to explore the very things that make us human in ways a contemporary, safely delivered narrative might not be able to do to the fullest. Even now, I still think back to Kino's journey on occasions, which says something to me about how effective it was at making me think and feel during its 13-episode span. At the end of the day, isn't that the goal of art? It isn't one of my favorite anime. It isn't even my favorite anime that I've seen this year. That title goes to Planetes. But out of all the shows I've watched in 2016, Kino is perhaps the most distinctive, thought-provoking, fantastical, honest in ideas, and downright human anime I've gotten around to seeing this year. For how skeptical it is at human nature, the message isn't that humanity is a mistake, that humanity shouldn't exist, that the cynicism directed at our fellow man is justified. The message of Kino's journey is that humanity is complicated. The world is complicated. The complications of the world can be so overwhelming that we have to make our own little world to cope with it. We stay in cities, towns, homes, not only for shelter or community, but in order to have a place to call our world, our place to be. But there are those who look past that little bubble and come to realize that what they perceive to be the world was only a very tiny piece. Those people may well explore the world, know the world, or even challenge the world for what it is, because the world is very complex, and we likely won't know everything there is to it in a single lifetime. But isn't the complexities of the world what make it beautiful?